Welcome to the training on how to effectively prepare for lobbying using what we call the Citizens Climate Lobby approach. So the goals for this meeting tonight or this training are to make the case for citizen lobbying and why it matters. Lobbying sometimes has a negative stereotype, but lobbying is a simple one way, the best way, I think, to build relationships, and it works. We'll talk about that. We'll briefly discuss the principles in effective lobby meeting, and that's really drills down to building relationships and using persuasive communications. And we'll also learn about the lobby team roles and planning your lobby meeting as well. And we'll give you some places to find tools and to support you and resources for your own meetings. So let's talk about what we call sometimes the transformative power of constituents advocacy, and really what's the role of citizen lobbyist? So many of you know, Citizens Climate Lobby was founded on the belief that ordinary people can organize, educate themselves, and overcome feelings of hopelessness or powerlessness to be effective with their government. So why lobby as a citizen? Well, I mean, there's one simple reason to lobby as a citizen, and it's because it works. So a key mantra that we have at CCL is politicians don't create political will, that they respond to it. And it's really our role as constituents to create so much political will that politicians have no other choice but to act on climate solutions. We know that members of the Congress and their staff can't know everything about every topic. And so that's what we're there for. Citizen engagement is a valued and encouraged in our country, and is considered really our right and our duty to engage in that political process. And the science behind it shows too that studies by the Congressional Management Foundation repeatedly show that the most effective way to impact or influence your member of Congress is through a face-to-face meeting with a constituent or even meeting with their staff as well. So we know that it's not possible for them, again, to know everything. That's why we're there. We're there to help inform them, and that's why we meet with them. And you got to ask another question. If we're not meeting with them, we know who is. We know that the professional lobbyists are in their meeting all the time. And so we should be meeting with them as frequently as we can as well. And I'd like to think about it as well, if you think about this, is that really all lobbying is, that last line, is it's simply expressing your voice and making the case for what you want Congress to do. But, we do have some advantages over professional lobbyists. Unlike paid lobbyists, we're real people. We have authentic issues. We're not paid to show up. We're paying our own way to show up. We're coming up there on our own initiative or going to our district offices here because there's an issue that really matters intrinsically to us and our families, and that's powerful. Like a professional lobbyist, though, we also treat our opposition with respect, knowing that we're not trying to convince them to agree with our view of the world. Rather, what we're trying to get them to do is take an action. And maybe that's take a vote, craft a piece of legislation, or even to express an opinion to leadership. The advantage we have is that we are present in the district. Professional lobbyists typically aren't. We're hearing, we're seeing, we're monitoring what's important to the people, the members of Congress that represents. And the other part here that's really important and impactful to know is that there are really like two types of constituents or constituent lobbyists, and they're not always given equal weight. Let me give you an example. You see a picture on the screen there of it looks like a town hall meeting. I don't know if that actually is a town hall meeting, but the picture looks like it. So say you're attending a town hall meeting and a fellow constituent stands up and says something like, I think we should reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's all they say. Well, that's a constituent with an opinion, and the congressperson will file that away as an opinion. And that's really just like remembering that the capital of France is Paris. It's like factual memory. Okay, there's a person that thinks we should reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But if the same constituent says, I think we should reduce our greenhouse gas emissions because my 3-year-old daughter has respiratory problems, and I'm worried about the health impacts on her developing lungs, a congressperson is likely to store that information in something called effective memory, which helps them recall the statement in vivid detail and really feel empathy for their constituent. It's a totally different situation. So the lesson here is that constituents with a genuine interest and a story are much more likely to have influence and be able to persuade than just those that have voiced an opinion. So we have that advantage over professional lobbyists. It's still nerve-wracking. It is still nerve-wracking to go to DC. You will feel unqualified. You'll think, oh, why am I here? You know, they're not going to listen to me. But the thing to remember is you have every right to be there and that your voice matters. So the key to successful meetings really depends on two things. The first is, building relationships, and the other is being persuasive with your member of Congress. So let's talk about those two things separately. So the key to our success is building long-term relationships with members of Congress and their staff. We always talk about we are in this for the long haul. We are here through administrations, through different Congresses. I've been around long enough to see members of Congress who are just being voted in when I joined CCL, who are no longer with it. And I've been able to see people who have established relationships in one office move to other offices and help to work the relationships over there as well. So it is about relationships. It's about finding places to connect with them, to find common ground. I couldn't find a lot of common ground with my first member of Congress, but he and that staff member that I connected with, we love the Texas Rangers. So I could send them emails all the time. And I put Texas Rangers in the subject line and he'd read my emails, even though it had nothing to do with Texas Rangers most of the time. It was mostly about our policies. But we were able to carry on a relationship. And he's the person that actually moved to a different office and went to work for a more moderate member of Congress and was actually able to get some things done for us. So we look for those social connections, and we also talk about places we care about. There's a lot in our, info sessions and other trainings where we talk about, what we savor, and a lot of people in the district, we all savor certain places. So there's common ground there. And it's easier to do if you do your homework and you have some ideas in mind before you walk in the door. But if you don't, pay attention to what's in the office when you walk in that door. Everything that the member of Congress or their staff cares about, believe me, is hanging on the walls in their offices, whether it's where they went to school, what they support. So look there, you'll be able to find some common ground there as well. So next we're going to talk a little bit about persuasive communications. This is I guess a complementary way of looking at things and of how to get our messages ready for members of Congress. And I think it also gives us a framework for thinking of things a little bit differently, but building upon the CCL values and the CCL ethos. So, a successful meeting also requires some persuasive communications. And within that, we'll talk about the messaging framework, knowing your audience, and tailoring the message. So, from the American Psychological Association, they say that persuasion is the active attempt to change attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors through targeted communication and influencing techniques. So what does that mean? It means we're not just presenting the facts in a lobby meeting, but we are crafting our message to the individual member of Congress in an effort to persuade them to support our asks. Now, what does that mean? That means there's a messaging framework that we've been looking at. That science really shows that messaging in groups of 3 really work best. Our one-pagers that we'll give you when you go into a meeting with a member of Congress and lobby training, like that provides some talking points, and you can map those into this framework. We usually have bullet points and you can put those in. But I'll tell you, it's a lot better if you find something more specific and unique to your member of Congress than the bullet points that we'll give you in DC. So not every message also works with every member, with every audience, and messages must be tailored to that audience for sure. And one last thing is an effective message, and we'll show you one in just a moment, includes simplicity, immediacy, and some type of threat or benefit for the person who's hearing your message. So the framework is a central message. It's really your desire or outcome or your call to action with 3 supporting points. You can go as far as adding 2 to 3 talking points for each supporting point, but let's take a look at what that means. So here's an example of the messaging triangle that we used at the Conservative Lobby Day earlier this year. Now, notice how it meets the criteria for an effective message. It's simple. We want you to preserve the clean energy tax credits because it boosts local economies, ensures economic stability, and helps improve our global competitiveness, right? So it's simple. It has immediacy because economic stability and global competitiveness definitely highlights a threat or a benefit. The second part of the messaging framework is to know your audience. And so this can be the hardest to grasp. And why is that? Because a lot of times and I do this, and especially when I'm having arguments with people, you know, I have to get myself in the mindset that it doesn't matter what my reasons are for these asks, or it doesn't matter the reasons why I'm arguing with somebody. What really matters, especially in this situation, we're going to meet with our members of Congress, is what they think their reasons might be to support our piece of legislation or the ask that we have of them. People are best persuaded by their own reasons. So it's trying to step into their shoes and try to see the issue from their perspective. That's what's important. So we need to find ways to adjust our message to their thinking. And that takes more preparation than just reading from the ask sheet. It really requires a lot of us. Now we have congressional biographies that we've sent out. They're online on CCL Community. Sorry, I don't have that link right here. I'll drop it in the chat in just a little bit. And that has lots of demographic information on our members of Congress, but really knowing them and knowing what might persuade them is different. So on our May national meeting, you might recall that we asked everyone to begin developing what we call an audience profile. I think we called it our member of Congress profile for every member of Congress. And it posed these questions. What is your member of Congress's knowledge of the policy? What is their interest or investment? What benefit or threat will they face for supporting the policy? That's a huge question, considering all the parts of the district and how the policy impacts them. How do they like to be addressed? Some are pretty casual, some are first names, some are like, senator or representative, but how do they like to be addressed? And also like the cultural factors that influence them, historical factors, the part of the country you live in, where somebody comes from, all these things. What have they worked on before? What's the history of that? What's the larger political picture around them? And what's great about that is our previous meeting minutes are a clue to that relationship and their opinions that they already have. So those are a really good source to lean into. But these questions, I want to give you an example of how it changed my thinking just this past conservative conference and lobby day in March. There's also more on community. I do have the link for that. I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. There's a whole training about getting to know your member of Congress with more tips for you as well to help you understand the attitude and the influences they have on them, and really, and most importantly, like and who they trust. So that's a really good training, a good starting spot if you want to really start diving in and getting to know your member of Congress even more than you do now. So the final part of the messaging framework is tailoring the message. It's important to know that some points will not work with every audience, right? We don't have to use all of our talking points. If none of the talking points work, then think creatively to find another way of phrasing things, but we want you to use words that matter, making it your own. It should feel authentic. And that's just really our value of integrity applies here. You're looking to understand their point of view, and you may choose your talking points based on them, but you're not making things up or hiding your own motivation. Like when I was meeting with an out-of-state senator, hey, we're here to talk about, obviously we have climate in our name. We're here to talk about climate change, but we're also here to talk about the clean energy tax credits and how that can be beneficial for your state. And so it's not hiding your motivation of why you're there, but it's also, choosing to connect with them on the way that works for them. So let's go back to the example I talked about in March. After we had developed the profile for my member of Congress, who's a very conservative senator, we noted that China's influence is a big concern for my member of Congress. And so looking back at the messaging triangle we had prepared and remembering that people are best persuaded by their own reasons and that we need to step into their shoes and try to see the issue from their perspective is crystal clear at that point which of these messages would have been more persuasive. So we honed in on, yeah, the clean energy tax credits, they're more than just economic prosperity, but that they help the US keep up with China in the race to dominate clean energy. We chose that word dominate specifically. And that by not keeping pace with China, that we are effectively ceding geopolitical power to the CCP. That was a different message. I've met with this office probably 5 times, and they very rarely write things down that we say. They wrote that down. I'm not saying that changed their mind, but we did give them a different way to think about this in a way that really aligned with their concerns and their values. So those are 2 principles for effective meetings. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into effective meetings, but those 2 are critical, right? Building relationships and being persuasive. So let's move to the second part of our agenda, and we'll start talking a little bit more about the meetings themselves, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So you can continue to, but you can put questions in the QA. Oh, I don't think the Q&A is enabled. Maybe it's enabled, maybe not. But you can put your questions in the chat if you have them, and we'll go come back to them. So talking about the lobby meeting roles and meeting planning, let's start with the lobby meeting roles. So what's important to remember here is that, our teams, I'm not sure the size of the teams when we get to DC. Obviously, if you're in district, the size of your teams can be a lot larger because you've got more people that can make it, down the street than they can make it all the way to DC. But, you want to assign specific roles to each team member, and knowing that one person may have more than one role. So be flexible. Some of the roles are really, don't require a lot of effort, so you can assign, someone to two roles. The leader of the role, most important person, but the leader isn't the person that talks the most. That's a misconception. The leader is the one that really manages the meeting. It's a skilled or someone experienced, has been in a few meetings before, and understands that really what they're trying to do is facilitate transitions and conversations, and making sure that they're following the meeting plan or ditching the meeting plan if that's what is needed at that point, right? If a member of Congress wants to go off and has shown interest in a different point, the meeting leader could even say, well, that's different when we came in here to talk about today, but let's follow that trail a little bit, right? And that can kind of signal to everybody, like, we're going off script here. They also ensure that, all participants, but especially the constituents, are heard from. That's the important thing. When we go to DC, there'll be a lot of times where we're going to have meetings with people who are outside of our district or also coming from different states. Don't be offended if the leader is trying to, get the constituents to speak more. They're really the conductor, if you think about it, of the meeting. The next role is the note taker. You could argue that this is as important as the meeting leader, because someone in this role needs to be an experienced volunteer, because taking the notes of the discussion, capturing the key points made by the member of Congress or the staffer, watching to see what they write down, that's so important. When they start writing, you need to write like, oh, they wrote down this point, because that is something that they're thinking about. We really shouldn't be as focused on what the CCL volunteers are saying from the note taker perspective. You can note the question, but also really the important thing is what the member of Congress or the staffer said back. So this person should be able to follow the note, the conversation easily. We asked the note taker to submit the outline. I'm sorry, to submit the online action tracker meeting minutes within 24 hours. And the importance of this is because it's a relationship. This is going to continue to go on good notes allow future lobby teams really to reflect on these previous meetings and pick up where they proceeded. And so we have a whole training that I'm going to drop a link in the chat on how to take good notes. And that's on CCL Community. It's not a tough training. It's a pretty quick one that you can skim and get through. Next up, we got the time monitor. So the time monitor at the beginning is going to ask about the available time. That shows respect for the member of Congress or their staffer. We want to keep the meeting on schedule. When there's like a minute left, we want the monitor to say, hey, excuse me. And, unless the member of Congress is speaking, maybe they sort of meekly kind of raise their hand. But, we want to alert them that, hey, we only have a few minutes left. A lot of times, the member of Congress staffer, well, we can go a little bit further if they're having a really good meeting. That happens a lot. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you'll notice, as a leader too, this is really important. You'll notice also if a member of Congress or a staffer is agitated and doesn't want to talk anymore. If they're looking at the clock, they're looking around the room, they close their book, they're not writing information down anymore. Use your best judgment. In that case, as a leader, you might just want to say, hey, well, you know what? We don't want to take up any more of your time, and, call that meeting to an end. It's all about relationships. So think about it. It's not always appropriate. I've seen it happen one time in probably 50 meetings where it just clearly wasn't a great meeting and they did not want to be there. So we decided to end the meeting for them. This is a great role. The time monitor is a great role for, we talked about out-of-state volunteers. This is a great role for an out-of-state volunteer to participate. There's an asker. This is the person who's going to present CCL's primary ask. So they'll just say something like, hey, here today, we're here to ask you to support carbon pricing that puts a steadily rising fee on fossil fuel emissions and returns all the revenue back to American households. The asker will leave their one-page primary and they'll leave the documents behind. So that's an important role. A lot of times that role too needs to be okay with what the member of Congress or the staffer is going to say. And usually it's better if they respond first, but maybe it's the leader. Maybe you've already pre-planned it that so-and-so will respond to whatever the comment says after the ask. But consider that the asker might be the best person to follow up with that initial question. Then there's a person who does follow up. Well, skip. No, I didn't. Okay, yeah. Got follow up. This person usually coordinates with the liaison. This team member is going to be making sure that we send any follow-up meeting materials requested. Also a thank you card. So it's another key thing to think about. Bring thank you cards to DC. And after the meeting, everybody signs the thank you card. But in most cases, the liaison is going to be the one that does the follow-up because they're going to be continuing to build the relationship. And, you end the meeting, you walk out, we'll talk about the sort of post-meeting debrief, but you can all sign the thank you card in the hall and take it back into the office and just drop it off. Mindy Mindy said, I think on the last call, make sure it's an unsealed envelope because it's a sealed envelope that has to go through the security screening processes. So don't put it in a sealed envelope. I say you could also just have a card that doesn't have an envelope at all. That would be totally fine. Just to sign that one and drop it off. There's a couple of other roles, a deliverer. We don't really have it listed here, but that's somebody who brings constituent letters, if you have any, or trusted messenger letters. That's really important. If you can bring a message from a trusted messenger back in the district, to like one really impactful person, that goes a long way to help your meetings. You can also have a photographer who's going to take a picture with permission. Make sure you get permission from the staff or the member of Congress. Hey, can we take a picture with you? I don't remember anyone ever saying no to that, but they may. Let them know we're going to post that on social media. That's another great role for an out-of-state volunteer to do that. But the important thing here really is everyone should be able to participate in the discussion. All lobby team members are encouraged to participate in the discussion, to actively listen, and to clarify any points. I've only got a few more minutes and then we're going to stop and take time for some questions. We're going to talk about planning meeting. What I really like to show you is a video that was created a couple of years ago that really will walk you through, if I can pull it up here, what a planning meeting looks like. So I'm going to play that video here for you real quick. And these are CCL volunteers just, practicing or playing or acting through a planning meeting. And play. And play again.
Thank you both for meeting to go over our meeting plan. I did send our one pager to the Congressman's DC office.
Right.
Thank you, Nate, for doing the research on the member and the district that you shared with us last week. Just a reminder, we do have limited time, so we need to stick to the plan, but be flexible if things come up. Let our values and listening skills guide us, mostly. If one of us gets off track, let's each agree to accept a gentle redirect from one of us, one of the team members. Does that work for everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Let's take a minute to review the meeting plan then we drafted previously. Let's build trust and deepen the relationship with the Congress member. Okay. Let's see. So let's go over the meeting roles. I will happily be the leader, appreciator. Which of you would like to be the appreciator?
I'll do that.
Anne? Okay, great. Time monitor, note keeper. We could probably group those.
Yeah,
names.
got paper in front of me.
Okay, perfect. Asker and deliver, I'll take that. And then follow up, I think, Anne? Yeah?
Yeah.
Got it? Okay, perfect. We will have the follow-up beat for you. And then what are our goals for this meeting? So we should have a strategy for further building the relationship with the office. I think
I think that it would be really important, at least from the appreciation aspect, is to support the member of Congress in their pushing for the recent appropriations bill that funded the rebuilding of the Red River Bridge.
okay, yeah, that could be a great way to kick off the meeting and show gratitude. Okay, that's great. I like that. That sounds like a really great plan to open up the meeting and show them your gratitude for their work. Our primary ask then, I think, could be permitting reform and green energy. I think that we need to bring more attention to the fact that it's far too easy to get natural gas and coal-powered energy permitted versus green energy, that those projects just get stuck in the pipeline. So I think that could be our primary ask. And then what about a supporting ask?
Yeah, related to that, I've been doing quite a bit of research into the IBEA, the Innovation and Business Electrification Act, which provides incentives to businesses to electrify through available tax credits from wind and solar and battery storage, and I think that just ties in pretty well to that. So,
great, we'll roll with that. Those are two great topics to touch on. Meeting topics. So the congressman's going to have priorities. We should try to narrow in on that. We should share CCL's overarching goals for bipartisan action on climate so they feel comfortable, and share the concept of carbon pricing and cash back to Americans. And did you have a story that you wanted to share?
I'd also like to share my business story of how I would like to electrify my beverage distribution warehouse.
Sure.
I feel like that's something the congressman would really find interesting.
I think they would. Yeah, I think you should definitely share your story. I think that'd add a lot to it.
It might relate to the supporting ask with the IBA as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I want to specifically mention that in this section as well.
Yes,
Oh, nice.
good note. Perfect, that sounds good. And I think we should also prepare some open-ended questions depending on how the conversation goes. Like how has the new Congress changed and what they think is possible for climate change in the House, as well as what community leaders they listen to in and around the district.
That's a good one.
Additional questions to consider during the meeting.
Yeah, I think we should always try to mention, how they see bipartisan paths towards addressing climate change in the future. It's how we get stuff done in Congress, so I'd like to bring that up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And yeah, maybe going off that too is what initiatives could members of their current party also take to move forward on effective climate policy, maybe like electrifying the grid.
Right.
Yep, absolutely. I think that'll tie in well. Okay. Beyond that, then our follow-up actions. We need to deliver a thank you note. Anne, I think you said you'd be able to take care of that.
Yep.
I will take care of the follow-up on the other meeting items, and then Nate, you're doing the notes, so you can submit the meeting notes after this. That'd be great.
Sounds great.
Okay, sounds like we're ready.
Awesome.
So yeah, that was just an example. I mean, obviously, a lobby planning meeting will last a lot longer than that. That was abbreviated for everyone's purposes. But notice a few things that they did. They talked about researching their member of Congress. Again, you want to do that in coordination with your liaison. Look at their press pages, right? Look at their newsletters. Really to get to understand, what it is that they are proud of, what their accomplishments are in their positions. this really helps identify areas where we can agree with them and potential concerns. I mean, my senator is he's not very close on where I am with my worldview and things, but he's also really big on bills to crack down on human trafficking. So I can always have like, ways that I can connect with them because that is so important to him. So there's again, I think the getting to know your member of Congress, I'll drop this link to this training. That's another one that you could look at. I think I did that earlier too, but that's another training for really how to get to your member of Congress. They didn't really talk about it because we really didn't talk about MOC profiles a few years ago, but those 6 questions, and heck, even come up with more questions. Those are just 6 that we came up with to try to really help you think, like, go deeper on your member of Congress, go deeper than the biographies. But you could probably think of even better questions, I'm sure. Notice they talked about having a goal for the meeting. I mean, ideally, we want the member of Congress to say yes to our ask, but that's not always realistic. So if it's a new office or one where we've struggled to connect, the main goal of the meeting might just be to start building that relationship so they can see you or the rest of the team as a resource and someone that they're willing to work with. In other cases, the goal could be just to introduce a new persuasive message that gets them to reconsider their position, even if it's not going to change their answer right away. So, they talked about scripting and rehearsal. We do have a meeting plan template that really outlines, all the roles that people can take and how the meeting can proceed, which I'll talk about in a minute. I just dropped a link to the meeting plan template in there. But I think the most important thing is practice, practice, practice. So, rehearse the meeting, think about potential scenarios or sensitive topics, practice reflective listening. Member of Congress says, like anyone, when you're in these situations, and it might be a situation where people don't agree, the best thing that you can do is ask for understanding. So what I'm hearing you say is, you're really concerned about if we were to put a price on carbon, how that might impact our domestic manufacturing. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, make sure so you've got them, they're hearing you, and you can say, like, I agree with you on that. Could I tell you what I've learned about this? So you're establishing common ground, you're showing that you're listening to them. You're not just jumping in and telling them like, no, there's a border adjustment. You're actually listening, talking, and asking for permission so that you can tell them what you've learned. All right, just a couple more slides and we'll take questions. Whoops, I went too far. Well, I can go back. Oh, yeah. The meeting outline. So sample meeting outline. I dropped the meeting plan template in the chat there, but it's really just like a kind of a 1, 2, 3. At the beginning, you're going to do sort of the introductions. You're going to thank them. You're going to show some appreciation, thank them for the time, ask them how much time they have for the meeting, tell them what you're there for, and then deliver the main request, the main ask. They're going to follow up right then. They're going to say either, well, we can't support this, or we don't like this part, whatever the case may be. But that's when the open-ended questions start, right? Then you're listening and learning. You might follow up again and say, hey, did any of this convince you to support our legislation now? Or what could we change in the legislation that would get your support? And then if we have a secondary ask, we always want to have something that they can say yes to. And so a lot of times we'll send in a much smaller sort of secondary ask. So something that we can get them on the road to really thinking about their role as a legislator in our government, and really showing that you value their role as a legislator. And here's something that maybe it's not as drastic as what we're asking for, or they might see it that way, but here's something a little bit smaller. Can you help us out with this one? Yeah, and then the last is you're just listening for their responses. You go outside, you do your meeting debrief, and you determine follow-up. What that meeting debrief looks like is just really as soon as possible. So, if you're in the district and going to your local district office in your hometown, this is not so hard. You guys could go to a coffee shop, you could meet in the parking lot. But in DC, you want to try to meet as soon as possible because you want to clarify the notes, you want to review them with everybody and confirm follow-up tasks. But also in DC, remember the hall, the Congress, it's a big marble palace or whatever it is, stone, right? And your voices amplify there. So try to remember, don't meet within earshot of the office you just met with. And remember that everyone walking up and down the halls is a potential staffer as well. So they're hearing us, and there'll be, close to 900 of us on Capitol Hill on that day. So consider that everyone, even in the cafeterias, everywhere, they're a potential staffer or a potential ally as well of ours. So, but during this debrief, you want to ask the note taker to read the notes back, make edits to the notes if you need to. And then the note taker should submit the notes within the 24 hours in the action tracker. And then the last couple things you want to do is you want to follow up. Hey, who's going to write and deliver the thank you card? If you're in DC again, it's fine just to walk in and hand deliver it. Who's going to file the meeting minutes and the action tracker? Who's going to send the follow-up meeting information to the member or the staffer? Usually that's the liaison. So even if your liaison's not in the meeting, you have a liaison for whatever reason, they couldn't be there, either in DC or in district, you could take the information back to them to say, hey, you want to follow up, and here's the stuff that they asked for. And then finally, like, who could post on social media about the event? And also just make sure that, you still had that permission from them to do so. All right. I think what we have covered, if I did a good job, is I'll scroll all the way back to our 3 points. Talked about lobbying its constituents, why it matters, and why we have really important advantages over paid professional lobbyists. We talked about the principles of a successful lobby meeting, that of building relationships and trying to be persuasive, not trying to fill people full of information or making them agree with us and our worldview, but really trying to find a way to get into their shoes, to think like them, and to find a message that resonates with them that might be able to persuade them. And then we talked about the lobby team meeting roles and how to plan your lobby meeting, and just briefly looked at what a lobby meeting might look like.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.